Hello everyone, this is my Read Aloud, Think Aloud presentation, and for this assignment I will guide you through the process I would use to introduce my students to one of Romero Bardeen's artworks. The goal is to effectively blend art interpretation with metacognitive strategies to help students learn how to approach disciplinary text or visual artworks. For this particular presentation, I decided to look over The Dove by Romero Bardeen, which you can see on this slide. He created this piece in 1964, and just to give you some background information about the artist, his work tends to focus on the life and culture of African Americans. He grew up during the Harlem Renaissance, which explains why his work was heavily influenced by the ideas established during this time. Here's an overview of the steps I plan on taking to ensure my students develop a deeper understanding of this artwork. First, we will work on listing our initial observations. We will then proceed to activate our prior knowledge to see if we can make sense of this artwork by connecting it to ideas we might be familiar with. Then we will use our art knowledge to analyze the composition and symbols in this artwork, followed by a comprehensive breakdown of information and aspects that are still confusing. And lastly, we will connect our thought process and observation to broader themes. Let's begin making our initial observations. I would start by describing what I immediately noticed in the artwork without previous interpretation of it. For example, I would comment on the fact that I see a lot of overlapping images. If I slow down and take a moment to really analyze the details of this artwork, I see a bird at the top, sort of overlooking everyone. I see some human figures doing different activities that seem a bit unclear based on how they're cut out, and overall what looks like a city street with buildings. The goal in this step is to explicitly model for our students how we are slowing down to take in details of the artworks that are being introduced to them. And we can even ask them, what do you see? If they're having trouble sort of coming up with ideas, by seeing the details that you're pointing out, it might invite them to then make their own observations. Once we have developed our initial observations, we can proceed to activate our prior knowledge. As educators, we can approach this by sharing how we connect elements of the work to prior knowledge or experiences. For example, I know earlier I mentioned the bird. I can share my thoughts with my students by saying something along the lines of, the bird reminds me of how freedom is often symbolized in art. I wonder if this is meant to contrast with the crowded and constrained street that we see below, especially since the bird is overlooking these people. Another important aspect to consider when trying to understand a piece of art is to look at the year it was created. We can see that this artwork was created in 1964, which some of our students might recognize as a time period in history when the civil rights movement was in full swing. At this time, many African Americans living in the rural South began to relocate to urban areas as a way to seek new opportunities. Once we acknowledge this, though, we can ask ourselves, are these themes that might be portrayed in the artwork, such as the socioeconomic or cultural impact it's had on African American communities? I think this is a crucial step to take because it presents itself as a great opportunity to link our disciplines so our students see the importance of developing habits of mind that help them think like an artist, a historian, or a scientist. The idea in this step is to show curiosity by asking rhetorical questions. Why might the artist use collage instead of painting? Is he reflecting on the fragmented nature of urban life? At this point, we're ready to move forward and we can start analyzing composition and symbols included in this artwork. At this point, we can guide our students through an interpretive process of the artwork. We can start by focusing on the composition. We can say something along the lines of, the fragmented, overlapping images create a sense of motion and chaos, which might reflect the vibrancy of city life. Or we could also focus on symbolism. The dove could represent peace or hope set against the gritty reality of the city. The idea is to show our students our thought process when deciding how these elements contribute to the overall meaning of the piece. For instance, I can also share that I'm thinking about how the bird is higher up, maybe to show a desire to escape or find a sense of freedom within the city. Now we're ready to start developing a comprehensive breakdown. We can begin by identifying a confusing aspect of this artwork. For example, I can share with my students that I'm confused about the way the human faces don't seem proportional. Let me think about why the artist chose to go in this direction. I wonder if it might symbolize different perspectives or the fragmented identities that everybody possesses. I could also approach this by saying, I'll look at other parts of the collage for hints about whether this distortion is about emotions or a cultural commentary. The idea is that during the step, our students begin to use context clues to make educated guesses about the possible meaning of the artwork. This leads us to our final step, which is to gather all the ideas we have developed and connect them to broader themes. We can accomplish this by summarizing the interpretations we have been developing throughout this process and then connecting those to larger and complex ideas. For example, I think the artist is showing us a complex view of urban life that is full of movement, culture, and struggle, and the bird might symbolize how people seek peace in spite of it all. By effectively following this process, we can show our students how artists use visual elements to communicate ideas that aren't always straightforward, much like how writers use metaphors in literature. So, how do Think Alouds benefit students? Well, we're sharing our thought process with students so that they learn how to approach complex text or artworks, and they also learn to see how artists use visual elements to communicate complex ideas that aren't always straightforward. We also show our students that it is completely normal to feel confused when interpreting an artwork. What matters is that we're using effective strategies to deepen our understanding of the content. As educators, we also learn to deliver our lessons in a way that engages our students by providing them with context that connects to their experiences and interests, which allows students to develop their own analysis of the artworks that are being discussed in the classroom. Some suggestions that I would keep in mind would be to use a high quality image of the artwork that you choose to discuss in class, to adjust your tone and pace to ensure that your explanations are engaging, as well as to use gestures to point out specific elements of the artwork. I also think it's great that we encourage our students to think along with us by pausing and asking reflective questions, as well as to reassure them that we're learning together. There are no wrong interpretations or answers when it comes to understanding art. Thank you so much for your time. I really hope you enjoyed this presentation.